Hello, my friend. Today we will once again explore and talk about the topic, the traps set by women that we always fall into. Let's discover them together. I received a letter from a man I'm going to call Victor. Victor is 43 years old, runs his own business, and by most external measures, has his life together. But his letter tells a different story. He writes, "I've been on 11 first dates in the past 4 months. Every single one ended badly. Arguments, insults, women blocking me afterward. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. I show up, I'm respectful, I tried to make a good impression, but somehow every time it falls apart. The last one called me emotionally unavailable before storming out. The one before that said I was too intense. Before that, I was boring. I'm starting to think the problem is me, but I genuinely don't know what I'm supposed to change." Victor isn't alone. I get variations of this letter constantly. Men who keep failing at the same stage in the same ways without understanding why. And after analyzing hundreds of these stories, I've noticed something. Most men aren't failing because of bad luck or because they're fundamentally broken. They're failing because they keep walking into the same 3 traps. Traps that look different on the surface but operate on the same psychological mechanism. Today, I'm going to break down all 3, not to blame anyone, but to help you recognize these patterns before they cost you years of your life. Because here's what Victor doesn't realize. He's not failing because women are unfair or because dating is impossible. He's failing because he keeps making the same mistakes, choosing the same types of situations and expecting different results. The common denominator in all his failed dates isn't bad luck, it's his own selection process. Before we dive into the specifics, let me give you the framework. Trap number 1 is what I call the promise of happiness. This is when a man abandons his own boundaries, preferences, and comfort zone because he believes a particular woman, usually based on her appearance, will deliver happiness he can't create for himself. Trap number 2 is the reversal. This is when a man enters a relationship hoping to solve one of his problems, housing, loneliness, financial pressure, and ends up becoming the solution to her problems instead. He goes in thinking he'll receive something and comes out having given everything. Trap number 3 is the generous angel. This is when a woman overwhelms a man with kindness, gifts, and affection from the very beginning, creating an artificial sense of connection that accelerates commitment before he's had time to evaluate who she actually is. All 3 traps have one thing in common. They exploit something the man wants but hasn't built for himself. They promise a shortcut to fulfillment, and shortcuts in relationships almost always lead to dead ends. Let's break them down one by one. Victor's 3rd date was with a woman named, let's call her Marina. Marina was stunning, the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks into a room. Victor had matched with her on an app and couldn't believe his luck when she agreed to meet. Now, here's something important about Victor. He's an introvert. He prefers quiet environments, a small cafe, a walk in the park, places where he can actually hear himself think and have a real conversation. Loud restaurants stress him out. Clubs make him anxious. He knows this about himself. When he asked Marina where she'd like to go, she said, "Surprise me." And then she added, "But I've been dying to check out that new rooftop bar downtown, the one with the live DJ." Victor felt his stomach tighten. Everything about that suggestion contradicted what he actually enjoys. But he looked at her photos again. He thought about how beautiful she was. He imagined walking into that rooftop bar with her on his arm, and he said yes. The night of the date, Marina arrived 40 minutes late. No apology, just a comment about traffic. Victor had been sitting alone at a table, nursing a drink that cost 3 times what he'd normally pay, trying to have a conversation over music so loud he could barely hear himself. When Marina finally sat down, she didn't stay seated for long. She kept getting up to take photos. She'd spot someone she knew and go chat with them for 10 minutes at a time. She was in her element. This was exactly the environment she thrived in. And Victor was drowning. After an hour, she finally looked at him and said, "You're really quiet tonight. Are you always this boring?" Something snapped in Victor. All the frustration of being in the wrong place, waiting too long, spending too much money trying to impress someone who hadn't shown him basic respect, it came out in a burst. He said something sharp, she said something sharper. He left money on the table and walked out. She blocked him that night. Victor told himself it was her fault. She was rude, she was self-centered, she didn't appreciate him. All of which might be true, but what Victor didn't see was his own role in the disaster. He chose the wrong venue for himself. He agreed to something that violated his nature. He set himself up to fail before the date even started. And Victor learned nothing, because his next date was with another beautiful woman who wanted to go somewhere loud and expensive. Same pattern, same outcome. What Victor doesn't understand, what most men in his position don't understand, is that he set himself up for failure. The moment he abandoned his own preferences, he made an unconscious calculation that went something like this: she's beautiful. Beautiful women are rare. If I can be with a beautiful woman, I'll feel good about myself. Therefore, I should do whatever it takes to secure her attention. This is the core illusion of trap number 1, the belief that a woman's beauty translates to your happiness, that her attractiveness, once captured, will somehow fill the empty spaces in your life. But here's the reality. Attraction is not compatibility. A woman being beautiful doesn't mean she shares your values. It doesn't mean she'll respect your boundaries. It doesn't mean you'll enjoy the same things, communicate the same way, or build a life that works for both of you. Victor knew who he was. He knew he was an introvert who needed calm environments. But he threw all of that away the moment a pretty face suggested something different. And the worst part? Even if the date had gone well, even if Marina had been charmed by his silence, where would it lead? To a relationship where Victor constantly sacrifices his comfort for environments that drain him. To a partnership built on him pretending to be someone he's not. The trap isn't the woman. The trap is the man's willingness to abandon himself in pursuit of something he thinks will make him whole. Real compatibility starts with honesty. If you're an introvert, find someone who appreciates that. If you hate loud places, don't pretend otherwise to impress someone. The right woman won't require you to betray yourself. If she does, she's the wrong woman, regardless of how she looks. The hardest part of avoiding this trap is accepting that beauty isn't rare. There are millions of attractive women in the world, but there are far fewer who are attractive and compatible with who you actually are. Stop treating beauty as the primary filter and start treating compatibility as the primary filter. Beauty without compatibility leads exactly where Victor keeps ending up: blocked, frustrated, and alone. Let me tell you about another man. We'll call him Dmitri. Dmitri was 41, recently divorced, and in a difficult position. The divorce had cost him his apartment. He was renting a small room, trying to rebuild his finances, feeling like he was starting over at an age when he should have been settled. Then he met Oksana. Oksana was 38, had a teenage son, and, importantly, owned her own apartment, a nice one. 2 bedrooms, good location, fully paid off. Dmitri saw an opportunity. Not consciously predatory, he genuinely liked Oksana, but somewhere in his mind a calculation was running. If this works out, my housing problem is solved. I can stop renting, I can stabilize. They moved fast. Within 3 months, Dmitri had essentially moved in. And that's when the reversal began. Oksana's apartment needed work. Small repairs at first, a leaky faucet, a broken shelf. Dmitri was handy, so he took care of it. Then bigger projects. The bathroom needed retiling, the kitchen appliances were old. There was talk of renovating the balcony. Dmitri found himself spending every weekend working on her apartment. His money was going into materials, his energy was going into projects, his free time disappeared. Then there was her son, a teenager who didn't respect Dmitri, who created constant tension, who needed things, school supplies, clothes, eventually a laptop. Oksana would hint that Dmitri should help, and Dmitri, wanting to keep the peace, wanting to secure his place, would help. 2 years later, Dmitri woke up one morning and realized something devastating. He had become Oksana's maintenance man and financial backup. The apartment he lived in wasn't his. The renovations he'd paid for increased her property value, not his net worth.
The stability he thought he was building was entirely in her name. When the relationship ended, and it did end, Dmitri walked away with nothing. Less than nothing, actually, because he'd neglected his own financial recovery to invest in hers. Looking back, Dmitri could see the signs he'd ignored. The way Oksana had framed every repair as, "We should fix this," when the apartment was entirely hers. The way her son's expenses somehow became their shared responsibility while her income remained her own. The way his weekends disappeared into her property while she went shopping or met friends. He wasn't her partner, he was her solution. Here's another version of the same trap. A man, we'll call him Sergey, had always dreamed of having a country house somewhere outside the city, a place to escape on weekends, grow a garden, breathe fresh air, but he couldn't afford one on his own. He met a woman who owned exactly that, a small house in the countryside inherited from her parents. When she mentioned it on their second date, Sergey's eyes lit up. This was perfect. This was fate. The relationship progressed quickly, partly because Sergey was genuinely attracted to her, partly because he couldn't stop thinking about that country house. Soon, they were spending every weekend there, and soon after that, Sergey noticed that the house needed work, a lot of work. The roof leaked, the fence was falling down, the garden had been neglected for years. He threw himself into it. Every weekend became a work weekend. He spent his savings on materials. He learned skills he'd never needed before. He poured years of effort into transforming that property. 5 years later, the relationship faded. They'd grown apart, stopped connecting, became more like business partners than lovers. When they finally ended it, Sergey looked at the beautiful country house he'd basically rebuilt with his own hands and realized it had never been his, not legally, not practically. He'd worked for years on someone else's dream. He drove back to the city with nothing but memories of weekends spent working and a lesson he wished he'd learned earlier. Both Dmitri and Sergey made the same fundamental mistake. They entered relationships hoping to solve personal problems through partnership. Dmitri needed housing. Sergey wanted a country retreat. Both found women who appeared to offer what they lacked, and both ended up giving far more than they received. This is how the reversal works. A man identifies something he needs: stability, comfort, a specific lifestyle. He meets someone who seems to have it. He attaches himself to her, hoping to access what she has. But instead of gaining what she possesses, he loses what he brings. The mechanism is simple. When you enter a relationship from a position of need, you lose negotiating power. You're not evaluating whether this person is right for you. You're trying to secure access to what they have, and that desperation makes you exploitable. The woman doesn't even have to be malicious. She might genuinely like you. But if she has her own problems, and everyone does, your eagerness to please makes you the obvious solution. You become the person who fixes, funds, supports, and maintains. You become the resource. The lesson is brutal but necessary. Never expect a partner to solve your problems. If you need housing, get housing. If you want a country house, save for one. Enter relationships from a position of completeness, not lack. Because when you bring neediness to the table, you'll leave with less than you came with. Here's a test you can run before any relationship. If this person disappeared tomorrow, would your life still be functional? Would you still have a roof over your head, money in your account, a social life, a purpose? If the answer is no, if her presence is essential to your basic stability, you're not entering a partnership, you're entering a dependency, and dependencies get exploited. This trap is the subtlest of the three because it feels so good at the beginning. Let me tell you about Andre. Andre was 39, had been single for 2 years, and was starting to wonder if he'd ever find someone. Then he met Yulia. From their very first meeting, Yulia was extraordinary, not just attractive, extraordinarily generous. She brought him a small gift on their first date. Nothing expensive, just a book she thought he'd like based on something he'd mentioned in their texts. Thoughtful, personal, it touched him. On their second date, she insisted on cooking for him, came to his apartment with groceries and made a full meal. The apartment smelled amazing. She'd even brought a candle to set the mood. Andre couldn't believe his luck. By the third date, she'd bought him a sweater because she'd noticed he was cold the last time they met. She'd memorized how he took his coffee. She texted him good morning and good night without fail. She seemed to anticipate his needs before he even voiced them. Andre was overwhelmed.
After years of dating women who seemed indifferent, who played games, who made him chase, here was someone who was all in from day one. It felt like finally meeting someone who actually cared. Within 2 months, they were exclusive. Within 4, she'd essentially moved in. Within 8, she was pregnant. That's when things changed. The generosity that had seemed endless began to reveal itself as an investment, expecting returns. The gifts stopped, but the expectations didn't. The sweet texts became demands for attention. The woman who had anticipated his needs now had a list of her own needs that seemed to grow daily. Andrei found himself in a relationship he hadn't fully evaluated, with a child on the way, legally and financially bound to someone he realized he barely knew. The courtship had been so intense, so fast, so overwhelming that he'd never stopped to ask the basic questions. Who is this person really? What does she want long term? Are we actually compatible, or am I just intoxicated by how good this feels? 2 years and a difficult separation later, Andrei was paying child support and wondering how he'd gotten there so fast. The speed was the warning sign he should have recognized. No one falls in love that fast. No one genuinely knows another person well enough to be that invested after 2 weeks. What Andrei experienced wasn't love, it was a campaign, and campaigns have objectives. The generous angel trap works because it exploits something every person craves: the feeling of being truly seen and cared for. When someone showers you with attention and generosity from the very beginning, it creates an artificial sense of intimacy. You feel connected to them faster than you should. You trust them before they've earned it. You commit before you've evaluated. This isn't necessarily manipulation. Some people genuinely express love through giving, but even genuine generosity at that intensity, that early, should raise questions. Why is this person so invested before they know me? What do they expect in return? Is this sustainable, or is this a courtship performance that will fade once commitment is secured? The rule here is simple. If it seems too good to be true, slow down. Not because good things don't exist, but because real connection takes time to develop. Someone who's moving that fast is either running from something, pursuing an agenda, or incapable of healthy pacing. Healthy relationships build gradually. Trust is earned over time, not assumed after a few thoughtful gifts. A woman who truly values you will be patient enough to let the relationship develop naturally. Someone rushing to lock you down is prioritizing the lock, not the relationship. Learn to accept generosity gracefully while maintaining boundaries. Thank her for the gift, but don't let it obligate you. Appreciate the meal, but don't move in next week. Let time reveal who she is before you make decisions that will bind you legally, financially, and emotionally. A useful test. Imagine the generosity stopped tomorrow. Would you still want to be with this person? If the answer requires hesitation, you're responding to the gifts, not the person. That's not a foundation. That's a transaction you haven't fully understood yet. Now, let's zoom out. What do all 3 traps have in common? In every case, the man chose a partner based on something other than genuine compatibility. Victor chose based on looks. Dmitri and Sergey chose based on practical advantages. Andrei chose based on how good the attention made him feel. None of them asked the fundamental question: is this person actually right for me? They were so focused on what they could get, beauty, housing, affection, that they forgot to evaluate what they were getting into. And in every case, the man ignored red flags that were visible from the beginning. Victor ignored the incompatibility of their preferences. Dmitri ignored the fact that he was building equity in someone else's asset. Sergey ignored the imbalance of investment. Andrei ignored the unnatural speed of the courtship. The information was there. They just didn't want to see it, because seeing it would mean walking away from something they wanted. This is the core problem. Emotion-driven decision-making in an area that demands logic. Feelings are not strategies. Attraction is not a plan. Desire is not due diligence. When you choose a partner based on how you feel rather than what you've carefully observed, you're gambling with years of your life.
And in gambling, the house always wins eventually. Dating isn't just about feelings. It's about compatibility, shared values, aligned goals, and mutual respect. It's about finding someone who fits your actual life, not someone who promises an escape from it. So, how do you avoid these traps? First, know what you actually want. Not what looks good, not what solves an immediate problem. What do you want in a partner for the long term? What values matter? What lifestyle do you want to build? Get clear on this before you start dating and use it as your filter. Second, choose partners whose personality and lifestyle align with yours. Third, never enter a relationship to solve a personal problem. Your housing situation is your responsibility. Your loneliness is your responsibility. Your financial stability is your responsibility. Fix these things yourself. Then, date from a position of strength rather than need. Fourth, don't be seduced by early generosity. Appreciate it, but don't let it accelerate your commitment. Time reveals character. Give yourself enough time to see who someone really is before you make binding decisions. Fifth, learn to say no early. If something feels wrong on the first date, wrong venue, wrong dynamic, wrong vibe, trust that instinct. Walking away from one bad date is infinitely easier than walking away from a bad marriage. Sixth, watch behavior, not words. Anyone can promise anything. What matters is what they do consistently over time. How does she treat you when things go wrong? How does she handle conflict? How does she behave when she doesn't get what she wants? These are the things that reveal character. Victor is still out there going on dates and failing because he hasn't learned to stop chasing beauty at the expense of compatibility. Dmitri rebuilt his life slowly, but he's wary now, maybe too wary. The lesson cost him years. Sergey drives past that country house sometimes, looks at the garden he planted, and reminds himself to never invest in something that isn't his. Andrei sends child support every month and wonders what would have happened if he just slowed down. These men aren't stupid. They aren't bad people. They're just men who fell into traps that were designed to catch exactly the kind of desires they had. The traps aren't going away. There will always be beautiful women who don't match your values. There will always be opportunities to solve your problems through someone else's assets. There will always be people who overwhelm you with affection before you've had time to evaluate them. What can change is you. You can learn to see these patterns before you fall into them. You can develop the discipline to walk away from things that feel good but aren't good for you. You can choose with your head instead of just your heart. The men who succeed in relationships aren't luckier than the ones who fail. They're just better at filtering. They know what they want, they know what they don't want, and they have the self-respect to wait for the right match instead of forcing the wrong one. Be that man. Filter ruthlessly. Maintain your boundaries, and never abandon who you are in pursuit of someone who probably isn't worth the sacrifice. Because in the end, the only person guaranteed to be in your life forever is you. Every woman you date might leave. Every relationship might end, but you will always have to live with yourself. So make sure the person you're becoming, the choices you're making, the compromises you're accepting are ones you can respect when you look in the mirror. The traps only catch men who don't see them. Now you see them. Those are the 3 traps: the promise of happiness, the reversal, the generous angel. Now you know what they look like. The question is, will you recognize them when they appear in your own life? So, what are your thoughts on today's topic? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel Psychological Depth so you won't miss any of our upcoming posts. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.